welcome to the J&J Sip and Say. Jill, how's it going this evening?
It's going.
It's going very good. Today is the 244th birthday anniversary for the United States Marines.
Hoorah.
Yeah.
Is that what they say?
I think so. Semper Fi, I know that.
If you're a Marine out there, don't make fun of for how I said that.
But happy birthday to the Marines and all the great Marines out there. It's Sunday night. Tomorrow is Veterans Day, so this episode will be released on Veterans Day, and we're talking kind of our passion for Veterans Day. I think us having family who has served, it means a lot to us. We're very pro-military, supporting our veterans and all that. So I thought it was absolutely important to do an episode about it. Do you know when Veterans Day started, Jill?
1919.
I just told you that right before the podcast started. Yes, it started in 1919 was the first one. It was actually called Armistice Day, and it marked the 1-year anniversary of World War I ending.
What does armistice mean?
I don't know. That's a trick question.
I
I think armistice is basically peace
into
peace
arms.
treaty. Yeah.
Okay,
I
that's what I was thinking when I thought about the word a little bit more.
Of course, we know World War I was the war to end all wars, and in less than 30 years, 31 years roughly, we had, or less than 20-some years, we had World War II. So I think we know, as bad as it sounds, we're always going to have wars, and we're always going to have a military. But it's very important that we celebrate those veterans, and it was actually changed to Veterans Day in 1954. So that's my super quick stats of the night based off Wikipedia. Make me sound super smart. So how about your family? I know I mentioned in the intro, veterans are very important to us. We try to thank them, go to events for them. So what's your passion with veterans, Jill? Where's that come from?
Well, not only have we had family that has served. I don't know. I'm gonna go on a rant real early in this.
Go
episode.
for it.
I don't get how we can't support our troops and our veterans. They've literally put their life on the line for me.
Right.
And there's a song out there. I don't know how popular it is, but I don't even remember who sang it or what's it called. But the verse is, there's only 2 people that have died for me, and that's a soldier and Jesus. Those are the only 2 people that have ever died for me. And I mean, not that I'm trying to put soldiers to the equivalent of Jesus.
They're making a sacrifice. Yeah,
they're making a sacrifice for not only their own families, but they're making a sacrifice for millions of people they don't even know.
That's the biggie for me. They're going to these foreign countries, putting their lives on the line for people they do not know. Just for that, they're doing it just to protect our country, our values, our Constitution, and they don't know,
And protect the spread of evil governments.
They're preventing the tyrannies, the communism, all that from coming to our shores. So, no,
Back
I think
to my.
No, keep going. Preach it.
Well, I was just going to continue on with our family, people in our family that have served. Immediate family. My dad was in the Army during Vietnam.
About 68, 69. I mean, when it was really ugly.
He was drafted in 69.
Yeah.
Because he graduated in high school in 68. So I don't think it was till like the following spring that he was drafted.
Yeah, he was there in the heart of it.
And he was more into training the Vietnamese, the good Vietnamese, on
South Vietnamese.
I don't want to get into a history lesson because I'm going to show what I don't remember from high school. The good Vietnamese, that's all I know.
South Vietnamese.
He wasn't training the Viet Cong or anything.
Right, Charlie.
Yeah. He was training them kind of in their like telecommunications stuff, for lack of a better word. He did some shifts as like a POW guard for a while.
Which I'm sure was very difficult.
Right. And he doesn't talk about a lot of it, at least not with me. I mean, I know I'm his daughter. He, wants to keep the evils of war from, I mean, I know I'm 32 years old, but I'm still his daughter, and
Right.
he's not going to go into the pure details of his experience.
Yeah, when I've talked to him about it, it's more about the country, the people. He always tries to put a positive light on.
Right.
He got to meet all these interesting people and see this beautiful countryside.
The food and the culture.
Because he went back and lived as a civilian, right?
He did go back, and he lived there for a year as a civilian, kind of doing the same thing, though.
He's like a contractor, right?
Right. He was contracted to train. He was just a civilian at the time.
Which I guess I kind of look at that as he saw the positive of the people, what good things were there, and wanted to go back and participate in that role.
I think he would love to go back just to see it now.
I bet it's changed so much.
Oh, yeah. Well, you're talking about a country that's in war for how many years, and now it's not.
It's not. It's modernized.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that would be an interesting trip. So, yeah, he was of that generation, that baby boomer generation that went over there and served our country. You had other family, right?
Right. And my dad wanted to go as far as being a Navy SEAL, but had shoulder problems.
Yeah.
And we all know the Navy SEALs, if you want to make it, you pretty much have to be a perfect specimen.
There's a lot of
20/20 vision, no hearing problems, no joint
physical problems.
Yeah, nothing. Along with passing all the training. But he had a shoulder problem and was not, I mean, I don't even think they let him start training to be one. I did have an uncle that was in the Army. I think he was stationed maybe in Italy for a while in the 70s. I think that's where my cousin was born. My grandfather, so this would be my dad's dad, was in the Navy during World War II. And he was a nose gunner on the fighter planes.
On the bombers?
Bombers. Again, I was only about 7 when he passed away, so I don't know a ton about his experience. I'd almost have to talk to my dad about that. All I know is U.S. Navy, served during World War II. He was stationed more in like the South Pacific area versus Europe. And yeah, he was a nose gunner. And the joke of the family is, my grandpa wasn't a very big man. And
that's why they put those guys.
Right. he was, the only guy. I mean, we've seen those planes at the Air Force Museum. They are not big as far as like where you put people.
No.
And where the nose gunner sits, it's not very big in there.
No, it's tiny.
And so that's where he was. And I think I had more appreciation for it once I saw those planes. Because, you have your pilot up top, and then you have your nose gunner underneath. And it's just like a glass encasing. And I'm like, oh, here's where my grandpa just would have been with a gun and easily could have been shot. I mean, that's where they're aiming for, to the pilot or the nose gunner. And like I said, I got a lot more appreciation once I kind of saw exactly how that would have worked.
Same here. Speaking of the Air Force Museum, it's located in Dayton, Ohio. Absolutely go.
It's free.
Take your family. It's free. If you're really into history, if you're really into war, you really appreciate what those...
Can you really be into war, though?
The history of it.
I know. I'm just calling you out.
If you appreciate what those men and women did, go to the Dayton... It's the National Air Force Museum. It's in Dayton. It's free to get into, and plan on spending all day there. It's fantastic. You get a true appreciation of what those people went through, and it starts from the very beginning of flight in the early 1900s all the way to like the F-22, the most modern fighter we have.
Some of the space shuttles.
Space shuttle, all the World War II stuff.
And it's not just looking at airplanes. It's all the memorabilia, and uniforms, and there's a Holocaust exhibit.
Yep, and a bulk of the planes that are there actually flew missions in the wars. I mean, they have the plane that dropped the second atomic bomb on Nagasaki.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they have the P-51 Mustang, great fighter jet or fighter plane in World War II. It flew missions.
And one of the, what are they called? Stealth.
They have the stealth bomber.
Stealth bomber.
The B-2 stealth bombers there. It's just definitely go check it out. It's a fantastic place. As far as my family, I had one grandpa was my mom's dad. He served front lines of World War II. He passed away when I was 5 or 6, so I didn't get a chance to talk to him. But he was one of those that never talked about it. And going through the paperwork that my parents found after he passed, he was basically frontline, saw, fought the Germans, machine gun fire. He was involved in all that. It's a mystery with him, though. It's interesting. We have a Purple Heart from him, but we can't find documentation if it was his Purple Heart, how he was awarded a Purple Heart, or if it was maybe a buddy who didn't make it home's Purple Heart. It's interesting, and as more research is done and all these websites you can check out, history of not just like our ancestors, but military service, I like to find out, where did that Purple Heart come from? So he, like I said, it sounded like he was in the heart of the battle in World War II in the late 40s when it got real ugly.
Was he Army?
Yes.
Or Navy?
I believe he was Army. And it seems like guys that don't really talk about it much saw a lot of times the worst stuff. My other grandpa, he was a little bit younger. He got drafted in like 1950, 51 during the Korean War, but he was actually sent to Germany and drove trucks all over Germany to supply the West Germans to help keep them going. So that was kind of his role, and it was during Korea, but not in Korea. So those are my two grandpas. That was their service. So
my other grandpa would have been a touch too old for World War II.
Yeah, my dad was a touch young for Nam because he didn't graduate high school until 76.
True.
So
yes.
he was 5 years after that. But yeah, so I think it's important, some guys don't want to talk about their service. My one grandpa, he talked quite a bit about Germany, about the countryside, and some of the things he did as far as the trucks he drove and all that. My other grandpa didn't hardly talk about it at all. Where your dad, he talks about certain things, but not as much the war. So, respect that.
Right.
I'm sure those guys saw so many bad things, but if they want to talk about it, or if they want to talk about, like I said, the countryside or some of the people they met or experiences they had, dive into that conversation.
Yeah, and he doesn't talk about it too much, but I mean, there's still things that affect him to this day.
Oh, absolutely.
He doesn't really like fireworks. It sounds like bombs going off.
Right.
He doesn't, and it's funny. I've heard this with a lot of Vietnam vets, the sound of helicopters. So they were all over Vietnam.
The Hueys.
Dropping bombs, dropping napalm, everything.
And they rode around in them everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there weren't many highways in Vietnam through the jungle.
Those are kind of just two of the big things that I know still kind of affect him now.
And I know he's really taken advantage of the VA, the Veterans Association.
Yes, and that's kind of just been in recent years.
It seems like it gets a lot of negative, but it seems like your dad's had a relatively positive experience.
I'd say for the most part. He gets, like, anytime he needs blood work done, or I know they have like a dermatologist. He's had like different moles removed.
Mm-hmm.
He's gotten that done there. One of the bigger things, he's gotten his hearing aids through the VA, and we all know how. Those can be like thousands of dollars.
Very expensive.
And they weren't for him. Gosh, I don't even know what else he gets. Those are just a few examples of things that he gets done there.
Right, and that's what it should be. And it's a real shame. And we didn't grow up, obviously, back in the 60s and 70s, but the guys from Vietnam came back and they were almost black sheep because they went over and media portrayed them as baby killers. Where I feel like guys coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan are really more welcomed. Hey, come home. We want to help you guys. We want to take care of you guys. I think Vietnam veterans are getting taken care of now. Not enough. But I couldn't imagine a serviceman coming back, and I've heard this many times, and having to take off his army fatigues and put on civilian clothes so he is not accused of being a baby killer or anything like that.
My dad would say that once he got back, like onto U.S. soil in an airport, he would change his clothes.
Right, I've heard that a lot, and it's a real shame because tomorrow's Veterans Day, or if you're listening to this podcast, today is. It shouldn't be just one day. We should appreciate our vets. We should talk to our vets. Whatever we can do to help them out. But the fact that 30 or 40, 50 years ago, the society as a whole almost looked down on them, and I just couldn't imagine that mentality.
No, and that was a different culture and lifestyle back then, and you just want to say to those people, okay, you may not agree why they're over there,
right?
But the government instituted a draft. My dad didn't have a choice. What's he gonna do? Go AWOL? I mean,
AWOL, draft dodger, and that's
and that's
worse.
a even worse label. I mean, what was he supposed to do? He went and served his country as he was supposed to do.
Yeah, and I don't know what the change was. I feel like kind of our generation, and when people come back from war, we want to help them. There's so many foundations now. Like I said, the VA, it does get a bad rap, but I've heard a lot of positive from it too.
I think the reason why it's different, this is just my philosophy. I think that the reason why it's different today. Okay, World War II, we were attacked at Pearl Harbor. That threw us into World War II. Everybody was behind the war effort. Iraq and Afghanistan now. We were attacked. I-9/11. That hit, we were attacked on U.S. soil. Vietnam, we're kind of fighting someone else's battle here.
When you put a face on evil, tyranny, whether it be Hitler, Mussolini, I'm drawing a blank
Stalin.
here. Stalin and part, yeah. But Iraqi, Saddam Hussein, or Osama bin Laden. When you put a face on that, it's easy to get behind.
Right, and like I said, we were
attacked. Where Vietnam, it was an idea. It was communism. It was stopping the spread of communism, which to me is just as important. I mean, you don't want that spread in that building. But when you put a face on that evil, it's easy for people to say, oh, yeah, we want to get Hitler. Mm-hmm. We got to take Osama bin Laden down. But when it's just an idea, no one supports that.
Right.
And then those guys are getting sent over there to fight against that and have no support when they come home. And I'm really glad that we live in a generation now where our troops are coming home and there's so many foundations that are doing great things. Like I said, the VA. But a lot of those foundations you got to be careful with too. Wounded Warriors had a big gaffe a few years ago, spending a lot of money on parties and kind of whining and dining and not spending that money where they needed to be. So if you're going to, I think you should, I think we all should, help out our veterans. If you're going to donate to a Veterans Foundation, if you're going to donate money, donate time, energy, whatever it is, really just kind of dig into it. I was fortunate enough to have Brock French on this podcast. He started the Wounded Veterans Foundation. It started out here in East Central Indiana, and they help veterans from all wars. So a Vietnam vet can get the same assistance as a guy coming back from Afghanistan today. They do dog training, like service-type dogs. They'll do that, and they'll also do home remodels. If a veteran loses a leg, ways to get his house modified to help out. Expanding the bathroom, widening doors, ramps, whatever it might be. And it's a great foundation. It's grown a lot over the few years, but Brock was one of these. He saw what another foundation was doing wrong, using money, in proper fashion, and decided to start his own. So look for those local ones where you can help people in your community. I think it's very important.
Right, and that's not just an Indiana foundation. I mean, it stretches all over.
It's got a big reach nowadays, and they've done a really good job. So I just want to give a shout out to Brock because Brock was a former Marine. I mean, he went and served and done his time, and instead of sitting back and saying, well, I did all I could, he's like, no, I want to do more. I want find a better way because this, one foundation had issues. I want to do it this way. So check into your local foundations, whether it be, wounded veterans, whether it be maybe something in your community. Just do your homework, make sure your money's going where it needs to go and it's being used properly.
Well, and that's with any charity.
It is. It's a shame it gets to that point, but, check it out. So
especially with the holidays coming up, just make sure you know where your money's going.
Right. And, I got to give a shout out. There's so many places nowadays that offer discounts on Veterans Day. Whether it be restaurants, retail stores. I had a list earlier if I can find it. There we go. There's so many places out there that are providing, it might be a free meal. It might be a discount on online purchasing. I mean, Applebee's, Bob Evans, Bonefish Grill. I think we have some of them in Indianapolis.
Probably.
I
think I saw it, like B-Dubs,
Chili's,
Chili's, Applebee's,
City Barbecue. Yeah, there's so many places. Cracker Barrel. You love Cracker Barrel, Joe.
I love most of the restaurants you've named.
Golden Corral. Go get some buffet. IHOP. Little Caesars. Here. Veterans and military with valid ID can snag a free $5 hot and ready lunch combo.
Awesome.
Get on that.
I love me some Little Caesars.
Get on that. Charlie's, Olive Garden, Outback. I mean, it's kind of getting to the point, Red Lobster, Red Robin.
You're kind of almost ostracized if you don't offer something. It's one day.
Starbucks even offers.
That's a surprise.
Even super liberal Starbucks. Good for them. TGIF.
TGI Fridays?
Yeah, it's the same
okay.
thing. But there's a lot of restaurants. I shared a post today, this afternoon, on restaurants and places that are doing discounts. So, Chipotle, Jill, there you go. 7-Eleven. Free Big Gulp at 7-Eleven. I would be all over that. I'm not a veteran, but I would be all over that
Big
if
Gulps,
I was.
huh?
That's fantastic. Yeah, so many of these places. I think this one has 145 places. Bubba Gump Shrimp, B-Dubs.
Oh, can I know I've already told you this, but a funny story about my dad.
Yeah.
So, what age would I have been? What year did Forrest Gump come out? 94?
I think 94.
So, okay, I would have been 7. So, still kind of in the gullible age. And I remember watching it with my dad. And obviously, there's the whole part of the movie where he goes to Vietnam. Because it's a whole nother country.
Yeah, especially in 68.
No, I was quoting the movie. And he was trying to convince me that he fought with Forrest Gump. Because, when you're like 6, 7, you're like trying to distinguish like real and fake and like movies are real or fake.
People giving you a hard time, absolutely.
And, I mean, I like legit sat there and I was like, I don't know if that's true. But he was trying to tell me and convince me that he did.
He served with Bubba and Forrest.
No, just Forrest.
Just Forrest.
Yeah, and he had a Lieutenant Dan.
Well, that's plausible.
Yeah.
Speaking of Lieutenant Dan, Gary Sinise, I probably said that wrong, who played Lieutenant Dan, is one of the best actors that supports the military. I think he has a big foundation. He does concerts for them. What is it when they go overseas and entertain the troops?
The USO.
USO, boom. Yeah, I know he's really big in that. So he's one of my favorite actors just because of that. Another thing for me, talking to veterans, because I grew up around a lot, especially Vietnam veterans, I learn a lot from them. You get talking to them, and it's just some of the lessons they've learned, either it be in basic training or advanced military training, or while they're overseas. Just kind of the appreciation and humbleness a lot of them have to. I feel like you can draw a lot of good life lessons out of that.
Well, yeah, they have so much life experience. My dad will say he got his college degree in Vietnam.
Right.
That was his college education.
Yeah. Think when you're 19 years old,
right.
What were we doing? You were going to swim practice. I was going to baseball practice.
I don't think people want to know what we were doing at 19.
But you know what I'm saying? We weren't fighting an enemy. We weren't away from home, technically.
Well, we've talked about it before, and this goes back to our society being so soft right now. you look at the men and women of the 40s, I still think they're the greatest generation.
Bar none.
You have these 18-year-old boys who are men who go overseas and fight.
Yeah.
And now you have 18-year-old boys right now who
And here's
I don't know. Just,
yeah, no,
I'm trying
you're
not
right.
to go on a rant.
And here's where I'm going to go on this. You had 18-year-old boys going to Europe and going to the South Pacific to fight, and they became men. But here at home, you had 18, 19-year-old women and even older women. They went into the factories and made tanks and built planes and Jeeps. Like, just the whole
effort
atmosphere.
behind it.
As much as that war was terrible, never won another world war. I would like to just almost been a fly on the wall to see that kind of dedication and effort in a common cause. I mean, to see, ladies rolling into around here, we had a bunch of automotive factories. Well, they made tanks during the war. I'm pretty sure GM, the big GM plant we used to have here back in the day, it made tanks.
Mm-hmm.
And there weren't men to work it.
Right.
They were overseas. So the women, Rosie the River.
It's like a league of their own. The women have to step in and play baseball.
Well, they stepped in and did a lot. And I just, that kind of selflessness, the way they got behind one cause, and I said Hitler was pretty easy to get, against, but I would like just to seen it or just kind of feel that atmosphere. Like I said, we done the podcast about September 12th, that atmosphere. I think that's what it probably was like for those 5-6 years.
Right. And back to what I was saying, I mean, these men and women, I hate the argument that these people are like, well, it's their choice nowadays. We don't have a draft. Yeah, it's they are choosing to go into the military to defend our country and to defend you and defend your right to make a stupid comment like that. And they're defending your right to sleep in peace at night. And
especially since 2001, September 2001, anyone who's entered the military since then knows there's a good chance
you're going to get deployed.
You're going overseas. Most likely to Afghanistan or
Iraq.
So they go in knowing that that's choice. That's
I've never understood that argument. Well, they
argument.
choose to do it.
Really?
Argument. I don't know.
You should thank those people. And that's another thing, a little thing, and I try to do it as often as I can. You meet someone and you find out they're a vet, or a lot of guys were Vietnam. Just say, hey, thanks, appreciate your service. That's all you gotta say, and I guarantee you it makes those guys' days or ladies' days.
They may not act like it, but I'm sure deep down.
I guarantee you it does. Hey, just thanks for your service. And I don't care if they were a Silver Star winner or maybe they never got deployed, but they took the chance and took the time out of their life to go to training and serve our country. So just, hey, thanks.
And I don't think people realize how great our country is compared to other countries.
That's another good point. I've talked to a lot of guys that came back from Iraq or served in Afghanistan, and they're like, we have no idea. No idea. And I try not to take anything for granted. I'm appreciative for everything I have. Like, you have no idea how bad it is. Like, women can't do a lot of things,
They can't do anything.
They don't want to do anything. Men live in fear because of might be the Taliban, and if they get on the wrong side, they're going to get killed, tortured, families are going to get taken out. Just to live in that constant fear. What's our biggest fear every day? Hope I'm on time. Hope first world problems.
First world problems.
It's almost embarrassing.
It is.
And then you see these guys and you talk to them, you're like, yeah, we won. Thanks for going over there and keeping the bad stuff there and keeping it out of our country. But yeah, I got to relook at things with myself. I got to be more appreciative and take advantage of what I do have here.
Well, we have to think about what would our world look like as Americans had we not won World War I, World War II.
Speaking German.
The Korean War.
Yeah.
The Vietnam War.
Might be under communist rule.
Iraq and Afghanistan. I mean, and who do you have to thank for that?
Troops.
Yeah.
The men and women. Your next door neighbor, I guarantee you look around. It don't take very long to find someone who went and served. So, Jill, we're going to wrap this up. Like I said, this is just something that we both feel very, very strongly about. I'm gonna say one more thing. Obviously, I'm a huge podcast junkie. The one podcast I truly enjoy is Jocko Willink's podcast. It's called Jocko Podcast. He was the commander of Navy SEALs during the Iraqi War, or part of it. Fantastic, super motivational type guy. But most of the time, he'll have people who have served our country, whether it be World War II, Nam, First Gulf War, Iraq, Afghanistan, and tell their stories. A lot of times, there are people who've been severely wounded or Medal of Honor winners, and you just listen to their stories, and it's just how extraordinary people can be. So that's just one shout out to Jocko's podcast. I love it, and you listen to it, and I think you get a new appreciation for a lot of the sacrifice the men and women have made. So, Jill, anything else? I mean, this is something we're very passionate about. We just want to give thanks to our troops. If you see someone, and not just on Veterans Day, you see someone, you meet them, you find out they're a vet, thank them. You know, if you got a living relative who's a vet, go out to lunch. A lot of discounts to be super cheap. Take a veteran to lunch. If you want to donate your time, money, just help out any way you can, or just give a big thanks to someone. So, Jill, cheers.
Cheers. Make it a great day and sip and say.